The air in the courtroom was thick enough to choke on. It smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and desperate sweat. District Attorney Harlan Reed adjusted his silk tie, pacing in front of the jury box like he owned the floorboards. He was a man who spent more on his haircuts than most people in the room spent on rent. He stopped, turning slowly to point a manicured finger at the defendant's table. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Reed began, his voice dripping with theatrical sorrow, "we live in a society of laws. Without them, we are animals. And what we have here," he gestured dismissively toward the defendant, "is a blatant disregard for those laws. The defendant didn't just steal from an auto shop. When confronted by a brave officer of the law, he chose violence." Darius Ellis sat perfectly still. He kept his eyes on the scarred wood of the table. He had to play this perfectly. To the world, he was Darius Ellis, a part-time mechanic with a spotty employment history and an address in the crumbling East Side projects. He had to look defeated. He had to look scared. But under the cheap polyester suit coat, his heart rate was steady, calm, and controlled. "Mr. Ellis," the voice boomed from above. Darius looked up. Judge Victor Lang was a massive man, his black robe straining at the shoulders. He had a face like a bulldog, heavy-jowled and perpetually red, with watery blue eyes that held a terrifying emptiness. Lang was a legend in the county, but for all the wrong reasons. They called him the hangman of the East Side. If you were poor, and especially if you were black, entering Lang's courtroom was considered a sentencing hearing, regardless of the evidence. "I saw you rolling your eyes, boy," Lang said. His voice was a low rumble. The courtroom went dead silent. The public defender, a young, frantic woman named Sarah Jenkins, shot up from her chair. "Objection, Your Honor. My client did no such thing, and referring to the defendant as boy is prejudicial and derogatory." Lang didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes locked on Darius. "Overruled. Sit down, Ms. Jenkins. Before I hold you in contempt for wasting my time, I know disrespect when I see it." Darius swallowed hard, forcing himself to look down again. "Record it," he thought. "Let it all go on the record." The tiny device sewn into the collar of his shirt was capturing every decibel. The prosecution called Officer Vance Harlan to the stand. He was thick-necked with a buzz cut and a uniform that was too tight across the chest. He walked with a swagger that suggested he knew exactly how this script ended. Harlan took the stand, swore on the Bible, and sat down chewing gum. "Officer Harlan," Reed smiled, "tell us what happened that night." Harlan leaned into the microphone. "I was on patrol in the East Side. I saw the suspect, Mr. Ellis, prying open the back door of an auto shop. When I approached him, he turned and swung a tire iron at my head. I had to use necessary force to subdue him." A collective gasp went through the gallery. It was a lie. A complete, total fabrication. Darius remembered the night vividly. He had been changing a tire on his own car, a beat-up sedan, on the side of the road. Harlan had pulled up, turned off his body camera, and told Darius he fit the description. There was no auto shop. There was no tire iron. Harlan had pistol whipped him, planted a bag of stolen catalytic converters in his trunk, and dragged him in. Darius touched the healing scar on his hairline. The headache was real. The anger was real. But the discipline was stronger. "He swung a tire iron," Reed repeated, feigning shock. "Did he say anything?" "Yeah," Harlan smirked, looking directly at Darius. "He said, 'You cops can't touch me.'" Sarah Jenkins stood up again. "Objection. Hearsay. And where is this tire iron? It wasn't entered into evidence because it doesn't exist." "Sustained on the hearsay," Judge Lang grunted. But he looked at the jury, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Though we all know how these things go in the heat of the moment, don't we? Police put their lives on the line." It was subtle, but it was instruction to the jury. Believe the cop. Ignore the facts. Darius watched the jury. 12 people, mostly middle-aged, looking tired. They looked at Harlan with respect. They looked at Darius with fear. Lang had engineered the selection process, dismissing anyone from the east side. Just wait, Darius thought, his hands gripping the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Dig the hole deeper. By the time the afternoon recess hit, the narrative was set. According to the court, Darius Ellis was a violent, erratic criminal who hated authority. Sarah Jenkins was pacing the small holding cell where Darius was being kept during the break. The room was a concrete box with a metal bench. I don't understand it, Sarah said, running a hand through her frizzy hair. She looked exhausted. She was a good lawyer, perhaps the only honest one in the building, but she was drowning. The body camera footage corrupted exactly when Harlan engaged you. The dash camera was off for maintenance. It's their word against yours, Darius. And Lang, he's not even pretending to be impartial today. She sat down next to him, lowering her voice. Look, they offered a plea deal just now. 5 years. Parole in 2. Darius looked up, his eyes sharp. I didn't do it, Sarah. I know you didn't, she whispered aggressively. I believe you. The stolen parts in your trunk had serial numbers from a shop 3 towns over that got hit while you were allegedly somewhere else. It's physically impossible. But Lang won't let me introduce the GPS data from your phone. He ruled it inadmissible due to lack of chain of custody. It's a setup, Darius. A railroad job. If I take the plea, Darius said, testing her, what happens? You go to prison. You lose your right to vote. You have a felony record. She hesitated. And they seize your car. And since they are claiming you used your grandmother's house as storage for stolen goods, Reed filed a motion to seize the property under civil forfeiture laws. There it was, the kicker, the house. In his cover story, Darius lived with his elderly grandmother in a small paid-off house on 4th Street. The house sat on a plot of land that a development company owned silently by Judge Lang's brother-in-law was desperate to buy. They want the house, Darius said quietly. It looks that way, Sarah sighed. If you're convicted, they take the deed. Your grandmother gets evicted. It's evil, Darius. But if you fight and lose, Lang will give you 20 years. He'll make an example of you. Darius stood up and walked to the bars. He saw the bailiff down the hall eating a sandwich. We don't take the deal, Darius said. Darius, please. No deal, he said, his voice dropping an octave, losing the nervous quiver he had feigned in the courtroom. He turned to her, and for a second Sarah saw something change in his face. The slouch disappeared, the jaw set like granite. He didn't look like a mechanic from the east side anymore. Go back in there, Sarah. Fight like hell. Object to everything. Make them scream. Sarah blinked, confused by the sudden shift in his demeanor. Okay, I will. But you need to prepare yourself for the verdict. I'm prepared, Darius said. When they returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted. It was hotter, more hostile. Judge Lang looked bored, checking his watch as if he had somewhere better to be. Defense, call your first witness, Lang yawned. The defense calls Darius Ellis, Sarah announced. A ripple went through the room. Defendants rarely took the stand in cases like this. It opened them up to cross-examination by sharks like Reed. Reed smiled. He licked his lips. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. He was ready to tear Darius apart. Darius walked to the witness box. He placed his hand on the Bible. He swore to tell the truth. Mr. Ellis, Sarah started, trying to guide him gently. Tell us where you were that night. I was on the highway changing a tire, Darius said calmly. I was returning from a job interview in the next county. Did you have a tire iron? I had a lug wrench for the tire. Did you threaten Officer Harlan? No. I kept my hands on the hood of the car as instructed. Sarah sat down, looking nervous. Your witness, Reed stood up slowly. He didn't walk to the podium. He walked right up to the witness box, invading Darius's space. Mr. Ellis, Reed sneered, you say you were at a job interview, but you're unemployed, aren't you? You haven't paid taxes in years. I do odd jobs. Cash work, right? Cash work? Is that what we're calling fencing stolen car parts now? Reed laughed, looking at the gallery. They chuckled nervously. I don't steal, Darius said. You don't steal? Reed leaned in, his face inches from Darius's. Let's talk about your history, Mr. Ellis. You were arrested 10 years ago for shoplifting, weren't you? I was 18. It was a candy bar. Charges were dropped. A pattern of behavior, Reed shouted, spinning around. A pattern of taking what isn't yours. You think the world owes you something, don't you? Objection, Sarah cried, badgering the witness. Overruled. Lang slammed the gavel. Answer the question, boy. Darius looked at the judge. He held Lang's gaze. I think the world owes us truth, Your Honor. Lang's face went purple. You watch your mouth in my court. You are here because you are a criminal. You are here because people like you ruin this city. The mask was slipping. Lang wasn't just biased. He was comfortable. He felt safe enough to say the quiet part out loud. People like me? Darius asked calmly. Thugs. Lang spat the word out. Leeches. You come into my courtroom, waste the taxpayers' money, and lie to my face. Well, I've got a surprise for you, Mr. Ellis. Justice in this county isn't blind. It sees right through you. I agree, Darius said. It sees everything. Reed scoffed. No further questions. The prosecution rested. As Darius stepped down, he saw Lang scribble something on a notepad. He wasn't taking notes. He was writing the sentence. The closing arguments were a blur. Sarah was passionate, pleading for reasonable doubt. Reed was arrogant, demanding law and order. The jury deliberated for only a short time. When they came back, none of them looked at Darius. Mr. Foreman, Lang beamed, have you reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. The foreman, a heavy-set man who had glared at Darius all trial, stood up. We find the defendant, Darius Ellis, guilty on all counts. Sarah put her head in her hands. Lang grinned, a terrible, predatory expression. Excellent. The jury is dismissed. He waited for the door to close behind the last juror before turning his attention back to the defense table. Mr. Ellis, stand up. Darius stood. I see no reason to delay sentencing, Lang said, shuffling his papers. I've seen enough of your kind to know that rehabilitation is a waste of resources. You are a danger to this community, and frankly, I'm going to make sure you never step foot in this county again. Your Honor, we request a sentencing hearing, Sarah begged. Denied, Lang roared. I sentence you to 20 years in the state penitentiary, maximum security, and pursuant to the civil asset forfeiture filing, the property on 4th Street is hereby seized by the court to pay for the damages and legal fees incurred by the state. Lang slammed the gavel down. Bailiff, take him away. The bailiff, a burly man named Officer Davis, moved to grab Darius's arm. Don't touch me, Darius said. It wasn't a request. The tone was so cold, so authoritative that Officer Davis actually froze. Excuse me? Lang laughed, disbelief coloring his face. Add resisting arrest to the file. Drag him out. I said. Darius raised his voice, projecting from the diaphragm, filling the room with a command that shattered the stale air. Do not touch me. Darius reached into his jacket pocket. He's got a gun! Reed shrieked, diving under the prosecution table. Officer Davis went for his holster. FBI! Darius shouted, whipping out not a gun, but a gold badge on a leather wallet. He held it high, the light catching the eagle crest. Special Agent Darius Ellis, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Nobody moves. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum of shock. Judge Lang froze, his gavel hovering in midair. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His face drained of color, turning from angry red to a sickly, pasty white. What? What is this? Lang stammered. This is a courtroom. You can't... Sit down, Victor, Darius barked. He didn't call him Your Honor. He didn't call him Judge. At that exact moment, The double doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. It wasn't the public. It was a tactical team. 6 agents in FBI windbreakers, body armor, and carrying rifles poured into the room, flanking the aisles. Behind them walked Assistant Director Elena Vargas, a woman with steel gray hair and a look that could cut glass. "Secure the exits," Vargas commanded. "Nobody leaves this room." Reed peeked his head out from under the table, trembling. Darius turned to the gallery, then back to the bench. He walked slowly toward the judge, the chains on his feet clinking on the floor. The only sound in the room. "Judge Victor Lang," Darius said, his voice calm, dangerous, and loud enough for the court reporter to hear. "You are under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit civil rights violations, and judicial corruption." Lang slumped back in his chair, the leather creaking loudly. You can't do this. I am a judge. I am the law in this county." Darius reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. He unlocked the cuffs on his wrists, the metal clattering onto the floor. He rubbed his wrists, looking Lang dead in the eye. "Not anymore." The silence in courtroom 4B didn't last. It shattered into a cacophony of shouting, shuffling boots, and the metallic click of safety latches disengaging. "This is a federal operation," Assistant Director Vargas announced, her voice cutting through the panic like a knife. "All court officers stand down. Place your weapons on the floor now." Officer Davis, the bailiff who had been moments away from dragging Darius to a cell, looked from the red-faced Judge Lang to the heavily armed FBI agents pointing automatic rifles at his chest. The math wasn't hard to do. He slowly unbuckled his gun belt and let it drop to the floor with a heavy thud, raising his hands. "Traitor!" Lang screamed, slamming his fists onto the bench. "Davis, do your job. Get these people out of my courtroom." "Not today, Victor," Darius said, stepping up onto the raised dais where the judge's bench sat. He didn't look like a victim anymore. He looked like a predator who had finally cornered his quarry. Darius leaned over the mahogany desk, invading the judge's sanctuary. "Victor Lang, you have the right to remain silent. Though given the thousands of hours of audio we have on you, I doubt it matters what you say now." "You wore a wire!" Lang gasped, clutching his chest. "In my chambers! That's illegal! That's privileged judicial conduct!" "Not when you're discussing how to launder money through your brother-in-law's shell companies," Darius replied coldly. "We didn't just tap the courtroom, Victor. We tapped your phone, your car, your country club locker. We even tapped the confession booth at St. Jude's. We know everything." While Darius cornered the judge, the chaos at the prosecution table was pitiful. District Attorney Harlan Reed, the man who had strutted like a peacock only an hour ago, was currently trying to crawl under the table to reach his briefcase. "Secure him," Vargas barked. 2 agents hauled Reed up by the armpits. He was weeping, his face streaked with fear. "I was forced," Reed shrieked, his voice high and shrill. "It was Lang. He made me do it. I have a family. I'll cut a deal. I can give you the names. I can give you the accounts." "Shut up, you spineless worm," Lang roared from the bench as agents moved in to cuff his hands behind his back. Darius turned to look at the jury box. The 12 jurors were pressed against the back wall, eyes wide with terror. They had just convicted a federal agent of a felony. They looked like they expected to be arrested next. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Darius said, his voice returning to a calm, professional baritone. "You can relax. You aren't under arrest. You were manipulated. The evidence you saw was fabricated. The testimony you heard was perjured. You were tools in a game rigged by the man sitting in that high chair." He pointed to Sarah Jenkins. The young public defender was standing frozen at her table, her mouth slightly open, staring at Darius as if he were a ghost. Darius walked down the steps and approached her. He signaled his team to give them space. "Sarah," he said softly. You played me this whole time," she stammered, shaking her head. "The tire iron, the job interview." "The interview was a cover," Darius admitted, "but the innocence was real. I didn't commit the crime, Sarah. And you defended me like I was your own brother. You're a hell of a lawyer. I thought I was losing my mind, she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. I thought the system was broken beyond repair. It is broken, Darius said, looking back at Lang being dragged down the steps in his robes. That's why we're here, to burn it down and build it back up. Agent Ellis, Vargas called out. We've secured the judge's chambers. Technicians are already pulling the hard drives. We found the ledger. The color drained from Lang's face completely. The ledger? He whispered. That's right, Darius smiled. A dark, satisfied smile. The blue book. The one you keep in the false bottom of your golf bag safe. The one listing every bribe, every seized property, and every innocent man you sent to prison to cover your tracks. Lang's knees buckled. The agents had to hold him up. Get him out of here, Darius commanded. As they dragged Lang past the gallery, the doors swung open again. But this time it wasn't police. It was the press. A swarm of cameras and reporters, alerted by the FBI just minutes before the raid, flooded the hallway. Get that camera out of my face, Lang shouted, trying to hide his face with his shoulder, but the handcuffs made it impossible. The flashbulbs popped like lightning storms. The image of the hangman of the East Side being hauled away in chains would be on the front page of every paper from the county to the capital by morning. Darius watched them go, then turned to Officer Harlan, the corrupt cop who had testified earlier. Harlan was trying to blend into the wall near the exit. Agent Ross, Darius said without looking. Don't let Officer Harlan leave. He has a date with a perjury charge and assault on a federal officer. Harlan made a break for the door, but Agent Ross, a former linebacker, tackled him into the jury box railing with a bone-crunching thud. The courtroom was finally secure, but for Darius, the work wasn't done. The arrest was the easy part. The explanation and the reckoning was just beginning. Sometime later, the courthouse was on lockdown. The FBI had commandeered Courtroom 4B as a temporary command post. The tables where Darius had sat as a defendant were now covered in laptops, tactical gear, and boxes of evidence seized from the district attorney's office downstairs. Assistant Director Elena Vargas stood at the front of the room reviewing a digital map of the county on a projector screen. Darius sat on the edge of the jury box, nursing a bottle of water. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a dull ache in his head where the stress had lived for months. Sarah Jenkins was still there. She had refused to leave until she understood the scope of what she had been part of. Vargas had granted her clearance, mostly because Darius insisted. So, Sarah said, looking at the map, it wasn't just about targeting minorities. That was the mechanism, not the motive, Darius explained, standing up and walking over to the map. He pointed to a series of red pins clustered in the East Side, the poorest district in the county. Racism was the tool Lang used because it was effective. Nobody questions it when a young black man from the projects gets sent away. It's expected. It's invisible. But why? Sarah asked. Look at the pins, Vargas interjected, tapping the screen. Every single one of these red pins represents a defendant Lang, sentenced to maximum terms in recent years, over 200 people. She clicked a button. A blue overlay appeared on the map, highlighting specific city blocks. The blue blocks lined up perfectly with the red pins. What is the blue zone? Sarah asked. That, Darius said, is the proposed route for the new interstate highway bypass. The state hasn't announced it yet, but the route was finalized in a closed-door meeting in the Capitol some time ago. Sarah's eyes widened. The highway? Eminent domain. Exactly. Darius nodded. If the state builds the highway, they have to buy the land. If the land is owned by homeowners, the negotiation takes years and costs millions. But if the homeowners are in prison and their assets are seized by the court under civil forfeiture laws, then the county owns the land. And who auctions off county-seized land? Sarah whispered. Judge Lang, Darius said. And who buys it for pennies on the dollar? Darius clicked a remote. A picture of a sleek, silver-haired man in a suit appeared on the screen. Meet Julian Thorne, CEO of Golden Hills Development, and Judge Lang's brother-in-law. They were stealing the neighborhoods, Sarah said, her voice trembling with rage. They were locking up fathers and sons, evicting grandmothers, stealing entire blocks just to flip the land to the state for a highway. The estimated profit for Golden Hills Development was tens of millions, Vargas said dryly. Lang's cut was substantial, funneled into offshore accounts in the Caymans. That's why they wanted your grandmother's house, Sarah realized. The one on 4th Street. It's right in the middle of the bypass interchange. My grandmother doesn't exist, Darius reminded her gently. The Bureau bought that house specifically to bait Lang. We knew it was the linchpin lot. If they couldn't get that lot, the highway project would stall. We knew Lang would get desperate, and he did. Vargas stepped forward. It's risky, Darius. If they make you... Darius checked his weapon, reholstering it under his jacket. Then the senator gets to meet the FBI a little earlier than planned. Sometime later, the convoy was moving. Lang sat in the back of a black SUV, sweating profusely. Darius sat in the driver's seat wearing dark sunglasses and a black tactical turtleneck under a blazer. Beside him sat Agent Ross, posing as another bodyguard. Behind them, in an unmarked van, Vargas and Sarah Jenkins were listening. Sarah had insisted on being there. She needed to hear the truth about the man she had faced in court. He agreed to the meeting, Darius said into his comms. ETA to the senator's estate is soon. All units, hold positions at the perimeter. Do not breach until I give the signal phrase. What's the signal phrase? Vargas's voice crackled in his ear. Darius looked in the rear-view mirror at the terrified judge. The signal is order in the court. The senator's estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. High iron gates, manicured hedges that cost more than most houses in the east side, and security cameras covering every inch of the long, winding driveway. Darius pulled the SUV up to the main portico. 2 private security guards with earpieces stepped forward. Judge Lang to see the senator, Darius said, his voice gravelly. He didn't look at the guards. He stared straight ahead. The guard checked a clipboard. Go ahead. Park around the side. Darius drove through. He parked, got out, and opened the back door for Lang. Pull it together, Darius whispered, gripping Lang's elbow hard enough to bruise. You're a judge. Act arrogant. If you look scared, they'll smell it. Lang nodded, wiping sweat from his upper lip. They walked to the massive oak doors. The doors opened, revealing a butler who led them not to a study, but to the dining room. Inside, the atmosphere was one of celebration, which was jarring given Lang's panic. A long table was set with crystal and silver. Seated at the head was Senator Patrick Graves. He was a silver fox of a man, with a tan that came from winters in warm places, and a smile that had won elections. To his right sat Chief of Police Marcus Hale, a thick-set man with a red face and eyes like beads of glass. To his left was Julian Thorne, the developer. Harrison, Graves boomed, raising a glass of scotch. You're late and you sound hysterical on the phone. Come sit. Have a drink. Marcus was just telling us about his new boat. Lang hesitated. Darius and Agent Ross stood by the wall, arms crossed, blending into the background like furniture. Graves glanced at them briefly, dismissively, then looked back at Lang. I can't drink, Lang said, his voice trembling slightly. He sat down but didn't pull his chair in. We have a problem. The Ellis kid, the mechanic. Graves laughed, waving a hand. The one you sentenced. I heard you gave him 20 years. Sounds like the problem is solved. He's appealing, Lang lied, sticking to the script. He has a lawyer, a sharp one. They're asking for the surveyor reports on the 4th Street lot. They know about the zoning, Patrick. They know about the highway. Chief Hale stopped chewing his steak. He slowly put his knife and fork down. How do they know that, Harrison? Hale asked. The only people who know about the zoning are in this room. I don't know. Lang's panic was real now, which made his performance convincing. Maybe there's a leak. Maybe one of your clerks talked Julian. Julian Thorne looked offended. My people are loyal. We pay them enough to be. Relax, Harrison, Senator Graves said, his voice dropping to a soothing, dangerous baritone. So what if they know? Who are they going to tell? The police. He gestured to Hale. The courts. He pointed at the Lang. The press? I own the 2 biggest papers in the state. This feels different, Lang insisted. This lawyer, she's talking about federal oversight. She's talking about the FBI. At the mention of the FBI, the room went silent. Graves stood up slowly. He walked over to the window, looking out at his sprawling grounds. The FBI doesn't care about a mechanic in this county, Harrison. You're losing your nerve. You've been on the bench too long. Maybe it's time you retired. Retired? Lang squeaked. Permanently? Hale grunted, reaching for his wine. Go to an island or go somewhere else. The threat hung in the air. I can't just leave, Lang shouted, playing his part perfectly. I need my share. The 4th Street sale closes soon. That's millions. I'm not walking away without my money. Graves turned around. His face was no longer the smiling politician. It was a mask of cold indifference. You'll get what we give you, Harrison. You're a liability. You botched the frame-up. You made a scene in the courtroom. We heard about the civil rights speech you gave. Sloppy. I did what you told me to do, Lang yelled. I framed him to get the land. I framed the last 10 of them. I ruined their lives so you could build your strip malls. Keep your voice down, Graves hissed. Yes, we ruined them because they were in the way of progress, Graves said. They are collateral damage. Do you think the Romans built the aqueducts without crushing a few bugs? So that's what we are. The voice didn't come from Lang. It came from the bodyguard by the wall. Graves turned, annoyed. Excuse me, did the help just speak? Darius Ellis stepped out of the shadows. He took off his sunglasses. He unbuttoned his blazer. I said, Darius repeated, walking toward the table. Is that what we are? Bugs? Collateral damage? Hale stood up, his hand going to his hip where his service weapon was holstered. Who the hell are you? Darius looked at the chief. Sit down, Marcus. Unless you want to add assault on a federal agent to your murder charge for Michael H. Hale froze. What did you say? Graves' eyes narrowed. He looked at Darius's face. Really looked at it. I know you, Graves whispered. I saw the file. You're the defendant. Ellis. That's right, Darius said, stopping at the end of the table. I'm the mechanic. I'm the nobody. I'm the cattle. How did you get in here? Graves demanded, looking at Lang. Harrison, what have you done? He did the right thing for the first time in his life, Darius said. He tapped the lapel of his jacket. Did you get all that, Director? Loud and clear, Vargas's voice boomed from the hidden speakers in Darius's earpiece, which he pulled out and dropped on the table. Order in the court, Darius said calmly. The floor-to-ceiling windows of the dining room shattered inward. Flashbang grenades rolled across the Persian rugs. Bang, bang! The room filled with blinding white light and a deafening ringing sound. FBI, get on the ground. Dozens of agents in tactical gear swarmed through the broken windows and the main doors. Laser sights danced across the room, painting red dots on the senator's silk suit, the chief's chest, and the developer's forehead. Chief Hale tried to draw his gun. Darius was faster. In one fluid motion, he vaulted over the corner of the table and kicked the gun out of Hale's hand. He grabbed the chief by the back of the neck and slammed his face into the fine china, sending gravy and porcelain flying. Don't even think about it, Darius growled. Senator Graves stood frozen, his hands half raised, his face a mask of shock. Do you know who I am? Graves screamed. I am a United States Senator. You can't touch me. This is a violation of the Constitution. Vargas walked in through the broken doors, stepping over the glass. She held up a warrant. "Actually, Senator," she said, her voice cutting through the noise, "the Constitution is exactly what we're using to arrest you for conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, accessory to murder, and violation of the RICO Act." Agents moved in, spinning Graves around and cuffing him. The metal clicked shut. "You're making a mistake," Graves screamed as he was hauled away. "I am untouchable. I am the system." Darius walked over to the senator. He leaned in close. "No, Senator," Darius said, his voice low and hard. "You're just a defendant." He looked around the room. Lang was being cuffed again. Thorne was weeping on the floor. Hale was unconscious. The table was destroyed. It was total devastation for the county elite. Sarah Jenkins walked in behind the agents. She looked at the wreckage of the dinner party. She looked at the powerful men being dragged out like common criminals. She walked up to Darius, who was straightening his jacket. "You okay?" she asked. Darius looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. "Not yet," he said. "We caught the wolves. Now we have to free the sheep." The fallout was nuclear. The raid on the senator's estate dominated the national news cycle for weeks. The footage of a sitting United States senator being led away in handcuffs screaming about the Constitution was played on every channel. But it was the Blue Book, Judge Lang's meticulous ledger of bribes and framed defendants, that truly dismantled the machine. Sometime later, the Tybin County Courthouse looked the same on the outside, but inside the air had changed. The smell of stale fear was gone, replaced by the frenetic energy of reform. Courtroom 4B was packed again. But this time, Victor Lang wasn't on the bench. He was at the defendant's table wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too small. Presiding over the case was a special federal magistrate, brought in from another district to ensure neutrality. "Victor Lang," the magistrate read from the file, "for your role in the conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights for racketeering and for multiple counts of judicial misconduct, you are hereby sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel came down. It wasn't a sharp crack like Lang's used to be. It was a heavy, final thud. Lang didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just stared at the floor, a broken man who had realized too late that power borrowed from corruption always comes with high interest. Senator Graves received decades in prison. Chief Hale got a long sentence, but the real victory wasn't the sentences. It was what happened afterward. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining on the steps where a massive crowd had gathered. They weren't protesters anymore. They were families. The heavy oak doors opened, and a stream of people began to walk out. These were the men and women Lang had wrongfully imprisoned to clear the land for the highway. Darius Ellis stood by his car at the curb, leaning against the hood. He watched as a young man, no older than 20, ran down the steps into the arms of his weeping mother. "We did that," a voice said beside him. Darius turned to see Sarah Jenkins. She looked different. She was wearing a tailored suit, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had just won the biggest class action lawsuit in state history. "You did that," Darius corrected her. "I just opened the door. You're the one who has to walk them through it." "The governor appointed me interim district attorney this morning," Sarah smiled, shielding her eyes from the sun. "My first act was to dismiss all pending cases from Officer Harlan's arrests. And the highway project? It's dead. The land is being returned to the homeowners." "Good," Darius nodded. "The county needs a sheepdog. The wolves are gone, but they always come back." "Where will you go?" Sarah asked. "Back to D.C. "Wherever the Bureau sends me," Darius said, opening his car door. "There are a lot of Judge Langs out there. A lot of towns where the badge is just a license to steal." He paused, looking at the scar on his wrist where the handcuffs had been. "You know, for a minute there in the cell," Darius admitted, "I thought he had me. I thought the system was too big to break." "The system is just people, Darius," Sarah said. "Sometimes it's bad people, but as long as there are people like you willing to get their hands dirty, There's hope. Darius smiled, a genuine, rare smile. He got into the car and started the engine. He rolled down the window one last time. "Keep fighting, counselor. Stay safe, agent." Darius pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic. In his rear-view mirror, he saw the courthouse shrinking. He saw the families hugging. He saw justice not as an abstract concept, but as a real, tangible thing. He adjusted his sunglasses, turned up the radio, and drove on. The case was closed, but the work never ended. And that is the story of how one brave agent and a determined lawyer brought down an entire empire of corruption. It's a terrifying reminder that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect the law are the ones breaking it. But it's also a reminder that the truth, no matter how deep it's buried, eventually comes to light. Judge Lang thought he was untouchable because of his title. Senator Graves thought his money made him a god, but they forgot the most important rule of nature. Even the biggest predators can fall if they underestimate their prey. What would you have done if you were in Sarah's shoes? Would you have taken the plea deal or fought for the truth? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with a friend who needs to see a bully get what they deserve. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new story. We have more tales of revenge and redemption coming next week. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.